welcome back to my channel. Now before I get into the recipe that I'm going to show you guys today, I have a question for all of my Guyanese folks out there. When was the last time that you had a nice hot cassava roti right off of the stove? Now, when I posted my picture of the cassava roti I made a few days ago, a lot of people commented on Facebook and on Instagram saying, "What is cassava roti? I've never heard of it." I'm like, well, now you've heard of it. So welcome back to Matthew's Guyanese Cooking. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my recipe, or Grammy's recipe, for cassava roti. Now this roti is a combination of sada roti and a combination of oil roti. Nonetheless, that cassava flavor is running through. Yes, it does have cassava in the dough. Weird concept, but again, in Guyana, there was root vegetables always available, and cassava was one of the biggest things. So my grandmother said that they started combining it into their roti dough. So Guyanese people are smart, you know? So I hope you guys enjoy this recipe, and if you didn't hear about it and you've never had it before, make sure you give it a try. Now for us in our household, cassava roti goes the best with some fried squash or zucchini, as we would call it in America. So I have this recipe coming now, and then I'm going to have the squash recipe coming really soon. So once you see both of those, you're going to have to give them both a try because it's so delicious. I love cassava roti right off of the stove with the squash. You could eat it with any other type of vegetable, any type of curry. Possibilities are endless, guys. And you know, if you're a little lazy and you don't want to cook anything with it, a nice little slab of butter or a thick slice of cheese will do just well in that cassava roti as well. It's so delicious, guys. So without further ado, let's get into the recipe, and I'm going to show you guys how this delicious sada roti or cassava roti is made. The ingredients that I'm going to need for my cassava roti today are very simple. All you're going to need is, of course, your cassava, which is the star of the show. You're going to peel your cassava, and then you're going to grate it on the finest side of your grater, so this way you can get a very fine texture such as this. Then of course we have our flour, we have a little bit of salt, we have some butter, and this is unsalted butter that I've just melted a bit, it's softened, and I have some baking powder as well as some water to help me bring my dough together. Now I wanted to mention, if you only had salted butter, then what you'd want to do is omit the salt, and you can go ahead and use your salted butter because it already contains the salt on the inside. So now let's get into working the dough together. Into my bowl, I'm going to go in with all of my flour. And then I'm going to go in with all of my grated cassava. And you're also going to want to add in all of your baking powder, all of your butter, and all of your salt. Once all of your ingredients are added into the bowl, you're going to go in with some clean hands, and you're going to go ahead and give it a nice mix. Now there's not really any rhyme or rhythm when putting this dough together, so as you guys can see, I just really dumped everything into the bowl. You really don't need to have a specific regimen onto what you're going to put into the bowl first, because it does not matter too much. The dough is very forgiving. So once you mix all of these ingredients in, and then you can feel like whether it's going to need a lot of water or not, but you can start streaming in your water little by little. And I'm using lukewarm water here. And you do not want to use cold water for this, because if you do, the roti is going to turn stiff when you're cooking it. So I'm going to continue adding water gradually, and I'll come back and show you guys what the finished dough looks like. I wanted to quickly mention that just like when making any type of roti, you want to add in your water little by little, because if you add in too much at one time, you might end up getting a really soft dough when you don't want it. Now this dough for me right here is in between a sada roti dough, which is very soft, and an oil roti dough, which is a little more firm. You want this to have a nice softness to it, so this way it's easy to roll out, but you do not want it to be too soft to where it's hard to work with. Adding the cassava into the flour actually changes the texture a bit, so this type of roti is a little harder to work with, but I promise if you follow these steps, you guys are going to have some of the best cassava rotis ever. So I'm going to continue kneading this for about 1 to 2 minutes, just until everything's incorporated and the dough is a little bit smooth, and then I'll show you what to do next. I finished kneading my dough and I got it into one uniform ball. What I'm going to do now is cover this with plastic wrap, and I'm going to allow it to sit and rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. You could let it go for a little longer, up to about 30 minutes if you have the time, but it's not necessary. 10 minutes will do the trick. So I'm going to cover it, let it rest. The reason we're doing that is because we just developed all of those glutens in the flour by kneading it so much. So you really want to allow it to rest a little bit, so this way those glutens can rest and you can get a nice soft roti in the end product. So I'm going to cover this and I'll come back and show you guys the next step. After about 15 minutes of resting, your dough is ready to use and ready to cook. So what I've done is I've broken my dough into little balls, and you can make your roti as big or as small as you want. I recommend you make them the size of your tawa, so this way it's not too hard to cook. Once you go ahead and break them into balls, you're going to smooth them out. So I'm just rolling them in the palm of my hand and then gathering the sides, so this way I have one smooth ball. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with the rest of my dough pieces. Once you've completed the process of smoothing out all of your dough balls, you're going to go ahead, lay them down on your surface, and you're going to cover them with a damp paper towel, so this way as you're rolling and cooking your rotis, the rest of the roti dough will not dry out. So now on to rolling out your cassava rotis. So I have my pan heating up on about a medium heat, and while that's coming up to temperature, I'm going to begin rolling my roti. I've taken one of my dough balls and I've dipped it in some dry flour, and I'm going to begin to roll it out. Now, just like when you're making any other type of roti, any type of flatbread, if you really want that round end product, you're going to have to make sure to apply an even pressure on your rolling pin and to keep flipping it every once in a while and make sure there's enough flour on the roti. Now, when you're making cassava roti, you can make it as thin or as thick as you want. Once your pan has been heated up on that medium heat and your roti is rolled out, you're going to go ahead and put it into your pan. As you guys can see, I'm not using a tawa today. I'm using a regular frying pan just so I could show you guys that roti can be made in a frying pan. You do not need a tawa. So I'm going to wait a few seconds for this side to bubble up, and then I'll come back. After a few seconds of cooking on one side, you're going to notice that there are a few small bubbles that form around the cassava roti. So what I went ahead and did was I flipped it, and I'm brushing on a little bit of oil now. Now, if you did not want to use oil, feel free to use a little bit of ghee. You could use some butter, coconut oil. You could also use a mixture of any type of oils or fats that you would like, and as per your taste. So once you oil the one side, you're going to flip it over again. And as you can see, I'm oiling the other side. And I'm going to give it one last flip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow it to brown evenly on both sides. This is going to take like another 30 to 40 seconds, and then we can remove it from the heat. And once you flip it a few times and you see that cassava roti has some beautiful golden brown spots on the edges, as well as throughout the roti, it is time to remove it from the heat. You do not want to overcook this roti because since you have the cassava in there, if you leave it too long on the stove, it's going to actually overcook and become too dry and too tough. Once you've removed your first roti from the pan, it's time to just repeat this whole process with the remaining dough balls until you've finished all of them. So all you're going to do is roll your roti dough out, make sure you have enough flour on that roti so this way it doesn't stick, and then you're going to add it onto your preheated pan, of course keeping your heat regulated so that roti doesn't overcook or it doesn't undercook. And once you get into the pan, you get a few bubbles, you're going to flip it, oil it, flip it again, oil it once more on the other side. And once you flip it again, you're going to allow it just to get a little brown color on those edges and throughout the roti, and then you can remove it from the heat. So this is what the final cassava roti looks like once it comes off of the stove. As you guys can see, it's nice and pliable, and it resembles somewhat of a tortilla. As I said before, it is a combination of the oil roti and sada roti because we do oil it like oil roti and it's thin, but we do not clap it just like sada roti. And basically, once you take them off of the stove, you're going to want to store them in an airtight container that you've lined with some paper towels, or you can just wrap them in a cloth like I'm doing here until you're done cooking them all. Alright guys, that is all I have for you today. My cassava roti is all done. They're so soft, so delicious, and everything a good cassava roti should be. So if you've never heard of cassava roti before, you're going to want to give this recipe a try because it is amazing and it is a nice difference from your traditional oil roti. I had mine with fried squash, as I said before. Be on the lookout for that recipe. But in the meanwhile, enjoy this cassava roti recipe. I'll see you all very soon in my next video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. Give this video a nice big thumbs up. Thank Grammy in the comments for providing me with this awesome recipe. And tell me what you guys would like to see next.